Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Let me tell you, we have a new star. A star is born, Elon.
Pumped up on Mars, juice, and ketamine.
He is the Thomas Edison plus of our age.
Probably his whole life is from a position of insecurity. I feel for the guy.
I would say 98% really appreciate what he does, but those 2% that are nasty, they are out there in full force.
We are meant for great things in the United States of America, and Elon reminds us of that.
We don't have a fourth branch of government called Elon Musk.
Welcome to Elon Inc., Bloomberg's weekly podcast about Elon Musk. It's Tuesday, March 4th. I'm your host, David Papadopoulos. So as Elon has been exploring his new life as a government worker, the share price of his publicly traded company, Tesla, has been on a wild ride. The stock skyrocketed after Trump's election, but recently it's been in free fall. And Elon is becoming increasingly the target for Democrat protesters. Every weekend, more people have showed up at Tesla dealerships across the U.S., marching, chanting, vandalizing, and overseas it might even be worse. Tesla sales have collapsed in Europe. Could the Trump trade be a bad deal for Elon and his investors? And then we'll look at some new feuds, finally some new feuds appearing on the horizon for Elon. It's no longer the tech CEOs that he's beefing with. They've pretty much all fallen in line behind him and Trump, but instead it's entire international alliances. And lastly, we hear some truly wild State of the Union Elon predictions. So to discuss all things Tesla, we are joined by the Bloomberg Global Auto Czar in London, Craig Trudell. Craig, hello there, sir.
Hello.
And we have our regulars, of course, as always, with us here. Max Chafkin in the studio with me. Max.
Hey, David.
And Dana Hull beaming in from California. Dana, hello.
Hey, David.
Okay, so for all of you, some numbers first to get a bit of a perspective about just how crazy this ride has been. From the run-up to the election back in the summer to the post-election peak, the Tesla stock price almost tripled. It was on an absolute tear. Since that peak, it's been pretty darn ugly, down over $200 per share, a drop of nearly 50%, much of it coming since the inauguration. And the stock is now essentially back at the level it was on Election Day. It's plummeting again today, down roughly 7% or so this morning as we're recording. Part of a broader route across markets here in the wake of the Trump tariffs, but also there were some really bad sales numbers for Tesla out of China overnight. Now, Craig, you've seen a lot of wild gyrations during your time covering Tesla, but even by those standards, this is pretty dramatic. What the hell is going on here?
I think we're seeing a dramatic rethinking of whether it's such a good thing that Elon Musk has so emphatically thrown his dark MAGA hat in with President Trump. So
I mean, remember, again, at the very beginning, Craig, the market was adamant that it was a brilliant idea. The market bid the stock up furiously in the first couple of weeks after the election.
Absolutely. I think the instant analysis, the sort of knee-jerk reaction to this was, how can it possibly be a bad thing to be incredibly close to the most powerful person in the world, to essentially, be his first buddy, to be his cabinet mate? I think everybody, I'm sure, was clear-eyed months ago that, Trump was not necessarily, wildly popular. He's very polarizing. But I think if you told people in October or early November that Trump and Musk were going to do some of the things they've done in the first, I think we're 6 weeks in now of this presidency, people would have said, you've got Trump derangement syndrome. I think they've been really, really aggressive, very sort of stick it in your face. And I think we are seeing, you can't really sort of take it out on SpaceX, right? I suppose you can leave X or Twitter. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have already done that. If you really want to stick it to Elon, you stick it to his most valuable company that has cars all over the place. And we're seeing that. We're seeing, dozens of protests across the U.S. I think we're also seeing, even some of Tesla's own customers putting different companies' badges onto their cars so that people think they're driving a Mazda or a BMW instead of a Model 3. It's incredible.
Whoa, wait a minute. Tell me more about that. How does that, A, how exactly does that work? And B, does it work? Is someone like, oh, that's a nice Mazda? And by the way, who wants a nice Mazda? You know?
Hey, dude, don't knock Mazda. I own a Mazda 3. I loved my Mazda.
Oh,
you just...
Oh, wait a minute. So you turned your Tesla into a Mazda? Is that what you're saying?
No.
Oh.
No, sir. But I mean, I think it's a pretty simple deal of you sort of, chip off your T decal off of the back of your vehicle. You put on a different badge. Those, you can buy those in the aftermarket pretty cheaply.
I see.
And you just hope people don't notice. But
that they're not thrown by the body type of the car.
There is a Cybertruck that is around our office in New York.
That you thought was a Ford F-150.
No, it has a old school Toyota logo on the tailgate. And I don't think they're trying to trick anybody, but I do think it looks kind of cool.
That is.
Better.
There you go. Max, on Craig's point that he made at the beginning, when we had that wild run-up in November and into early December, I actually believe if you pull the tape on this show, we said this seems like a fine idea in the abstract, like is a very, an investing thesis, like, he's first buddy, he's super close to power. As an abstract investing thesis, it sort of seemed like it worked. But we did keep saying, well, what the hell does that look like in the nitty-gritty?
100%. And I've made this point before, but like the main rationale for the run-up in the price was that somehow Donald Trump was going to be good for Elon Musk's robotaxi ambitions. But it was not at all clear how he would be good. Like, if Donald Trump, waves a magic wand and legalizes, Cybertrucks or cybercabs.
Yeah, you still got to produce.
You got to make one. And they still haven't done that. And so that's a problem. And then I do think what Craig is saying is true, right? The sort of volume and sort of the energy from Musk is more aggressive than we would have expected, maybe more polarizing than we expected. I also think that what Musk is doing is cutting against his own brand in ways that are very harmful. Not just because Tesla has a lot of left-wing customers, and those customers are now very mad and they want to protest or cover up the Tesla logos, but also because Musk's personal brand and what made him appealing was inventing stuff and coming up with, and now obviously you can debate just how much inventing he actually did or whatever, but this is a guy who's made his thing creating new products. And all of a sudden he's sort of cosplaying as one of the consultants from Office Space. I mean, to the point where he's literally wearing it as a slogan, almost forgetting that those guys were not cool in Office Space. People do not necessarily. So in addition to all the polarization, you also just have this kind of brand confusion. And all along, and I'm sure Dan is about to say this, but Tesla's actual sales, the actual numbers that are coming out of this company have been bad.
Yeah, I mean, and to Max's point, he's sort of, flinging around a chainsaw and really embracing this role as this destroyer of the federal government and moving fast and breaking things and firing people. And let me tell you, people do not buy cars when they're worried about the economy, when they're worried about losing their job, when they are worried about interest rates, when they're worried about their 401k going up in smoke.
Yeah, it's been a pretty brutal sell-off. Yes.
Yeah, and to be clear, and Craig knows this well, the first quarter is always the worst for car sales typically, right? There's a lot of incentives to clear out inventory at the end of the year. So the fourth quarter is typically very strong. The first quarter is typically very slow. But what you're seeing out of the Tesla numbers now is despite all of these incentives, free supercharging and yada, yada, they are not moving metal and their lineup is really old and the Cybertruck sales are very weak. And it's not just in the United States where Musk is very polarizing. It's in Europe and it's in China. Those are the big three markets. So the first quarter is going to be super ugly.
If we can go back also, and I hate to talk up myself here, but if you go to the year-end clips, Max, okay, when everybody made predictions.
I know it.
I made a lot of bad predictions, including my Kentucky Derby pick, which isn't looking good at all. But I did predict a convergence in the valuations of Tesla and SpaceX. And man, If you would put that trade on, if you'd gone short Tesla, long SpaceX, holy smokes, you'd be retired right now.
It's looking good. I mean, I think there's still quite a gap between the, reported valuation of SpaceX and the current valuation of Tesla. Nearly $400 billion for SpaceX, a little more than $800 billion for Tesla last I checked. But still, that gap has closed. And I think the issue is, Craig brought this up, but like being the first buddy is great. And I think it really impressed investors. But the problem is that is an unpaid position. And to monetize that position, Elon Musk has limited options. Like there are ways that SpaceX can monetize Musk's access. Tesla has really struggled. And there was this this weird story that we talked about weeks ago on the podcast about the State Department maybe putting an item in a spreadsheet saying it was going to buy $400 million worth of Cybertrucks. And
but even so, that ain't much.
Number one, that's not much. And that is sort of turning into like a mini scandal. Earlier today or yesterday, Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal sent a letter basically saying we need to explain this. You see, like it's going to be hard for Musk to monetize this without creating even more political...
to monetize it from the Tesla side.
From the Tesla side.
But,
I think even from the SpaceX side, frankly.
You think?
But I think it's easier from the SpaceX has a much easier
So
sell.
hard to monetize there, but then as Craig was alluding to earlier, it's really easy because Tesla is such a, is a consumer product for consumers to take it out on the brand in a way that, SpaceX is largely shielded from that, right? You cannot punish SpaceX.
I suppose if you were really angry, you could show up at the beach in Boca Chica and try to swing by in your boat with a protest sign or fly a bunch of drones or something. But yeah, I mean, the thing about Tesla showrooms is that they are in visible locations in congressional districts all across the country. And, this whole quote unquote Tesla takedown protest, it's a very easy way for the average citizen to participate in something visible. And the anchor is really about Doge. I mean, I went to the one in Berkeley a couple of weeks ago, and it's all these people. Some of them owned Tesla, some of them didn't, but they're very upset about what Trump and Musk are doing vis-a-vis Doge. And you can go to the showroom and then you can go out to lunch. This is the way that a lot of people are participating. But I think, the other thing to just remember about Tesla and sales is that Elon's politics aside, the company has a really stale lineup and the Cybertruck is not doing well. So that is the main thing. There are a lot of other electric vehicles on the market now. And if you care about climate and want to buy an EV, Tesla is no longer the game in town.
Well, that's because Musk kind of bet on this idea that he didn't need to refresh the lineup. He thought that cars were essentially like software. You could just update them. The iPhone pretty much looks the same as it's always, as it's always looked. And that, basically the halo around the company was going to lift it and make it possible to basically have an iPhone of cars. If you look way back before we started hearing the robotaxi story, that was the extreme bull case for Tesla. It was that it was going to change the paradigm of the car business.
The hardware didn't matter anymore. All that mattered was the software.
But that story was really dependent on the Elon Musk brand, on Elon Musk as this innovator, as this guy who was bringing this world of abundance and cleaner technology and all those things. And now he stands, for something else. And it seems like Elon Musk is trying, at least to some extent, to address this. He went on Joe Rogan's podcast again, over 3 hours long again. It's kind of my day on Friday was just sort of waiting for the guillotine to fall, and I have to drop everything and listen to this. And but anyway, it really seemed like the point of the interview. They hit all the usual Rogan topics. They talked about flying saucers. They talked about, is there a secret propulsion system? I can't remember if they hit ancient aliens or not, but I would be just absolutely shocked if they didn't somehow. But it seemed like the real point of the appearance was essentially to deny that he had made a Nazi salute at the inauguration. Rogan kind of backed him up on that. They moved on from it very quickly. It didn't feel super enthusiastic on Rogan's part, but they sort of got through it. And it really seemed like an effort to address some of these slogans that are being chanted by protesters, as well as the ad campaign we talked about the other day. Where people, they're putting up these posters calling the Tesla a swastika in reference, of course, to Elon Musk's gesture at the inauguration, which he said was not a Nazi salute, for the record.
Right. Now, Craig, back to you. Give us the latest update on sales numbers out of Europe. I know they were starting to look grim. They're really grim. Have we had any fresh reports in recent days?
Yeah, I mean, I do want to just quickly, go back to when Dana was talking about how the first quarter is always seasonally really slow for Tesla, but also for the industry. Last year, the first quarter was really crummy for Tesla. So not only are the numbers I'm about to share not good, but they're sort of, off of an already depressing level. And so, in January, we saw a 45% drop across Europe just for that month. Some of the biggest markets in Europe, down 63% in France, down 59% in Germany. In February, we are just starting to get reports for a couple of the biggest markets in France, down 26%. So I guess that's incrementally some improvement, but that's still year to date is a pretty ugly figure. They're down dramatically in Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, and we'll get some figures from Germany and the UK on Wednesday. And then I think we mentioned already in China, the wholesales figures out of China.
Yeah. Now explain those numbers. So those are different than the numbers you were just describing out of Europe. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So in Europe, we're talking about registration. So that's actually, cars being registered and handed over to consumers. In terms of in China, these wholesales, this is basically shipments from the factory that Tesla has in Shanghai. So this is more akin to production than it is retail sales. And so I do think one point that we absolutely have to mention is that there is this real question of how much of this is Elon sort of self-owning and how much of this is a Model Y issue. And we should note that as stale as the lineup is, the company is giving a facelift to the Model Y. That is far and away their most important vehicle. And having a multi-week shutdown of the Model Y was a big factor in why wholesales were down 49% in February. The question, of course, is how much of that is, disruption and the time it takes to ramp back up from that disruption, and how much of it is also, not feeling the need to crank out as many Model 3s because that hasn't been in strong demand.
That production is both for sale in China and then for export to some of their export markets.
Including Europe.
Including Europe, right. I
Correct.
see. Now, Dana, so while all this is happening, while the stock is giving it up in a big way, Musk came out in recent days and eked not a forecast, but an ambition, a hope, an aspiration that the stock would rise to $700 over in coming years, a rally of 1,000%, Dana Hall. And I'm like, this seems like the old carnival barker at work here.
Yeah, I mean, but he's sort of said this before. I mean, he said multiple times that, Tesla has the potential to be the most valuable company in the world, and it's going to depend on strong execution, but he's optimistic that there's a path to get there, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's all about Tesla as an AI company. And I think the truth is Elon Musk is bored of cars. He is bored of building cars. The future of the company is all about the robotaxi. We reported last week exclusively that Tesla has applied for a permit to kind of get into the ride-hailing business in California. They have not talked at all about really their future product lineup. They're supposed to be coming out with a more affordable version. People think it's like a decontented Model Y, or maybe it's a cheaper car, or maybe it's just the robotaxi, but there hasn't been a lot of visibility into what their product pipeline is. They showed off a van at some point. We haven't heard anything else about the van. So just this whole idea that this is a car company with a whole product cycle of cars, they're not talking about that. Elon is only talking about AI and Grok and Doge. And He's been in Washington, D.C. basically since the election. Yeah. He's been in D.C. or Texas or Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, no, he indeed is acting, as you said, like a bored car maker. And, Max, it reminds me of an old Gabriel Garcia Marquez line, which is a bored writer makes for a bored reader. And in this case, I would say a bored car maker makes for a bored car driver. It seems like between the political pushback against him and the fact that he doesn't really seem to much care about cars right now is not a great mix.
Yeah, 100%. And even I think part of the problem here with the stock is that in addition to the sales problems that we've been talking about, in addition to the challenges with the lineup that you're kind of bringing up, they're behind on robotaxis. So even if Elon Musk hits this very ambitious goal of launching a robotaxi service in Austin, Texas in June, he's behind. Today or yesterday, this week, Uber and Waymo announced that they've been testing. Yeah. Waymo's been testing in Austin for some time. They are going to open Waymo up to customers shortly. So they've gotten beat to that market. They're not going to be the first one to that market. And even the kind of novelty of the robotaxi, we're seeing in China BYD giving away its basically equivalent of Tesla FSD, the so-called full self-driving system, for free, right? Like it's not clear that these technologies that he has said are going to be worth, $30 trillion or something crazy are actually going to be worth that they're going to be worth that to consumers. It isn't working out that way for the companies that are already in these markets.
Okay, so we're going to wrap it up there with you, Craig. I would just say a couple final thoughts. One is, as my son has often pointed out to us, we are a contrarian indicator here. So every time we talk about the stock collapsing in a big way, it immediately rebounds. Everybody should brace for the rebound. But, Craig, we want you back on when you convert your Mazda to a Tesla. Take a picture of it, okay, and send it over. And then we'll get you on and we'll interview about that.
I'm going to convert my Honda Odyssey to a Cybertruck just to be contrarian.
I like it.
I changed over my Mazda because I knew Elon was crazy. That's my sticker. Yeah.
That's exactly it. Craig, talk soon.
Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Chafkin, you have some feuds to report.
Oh,
feuds,
man.
but kind of weird feuds.
It's busy.
Big high concept feuds.
Well, Elon Musk, I haven't actually checked the data, and I'm sure we will do this at some point, but he seems like he's been more active on X than ever, or as active as ever. And yeah, it's so many feuds that it's easy to even lose them. The first one I want to start with, I feel like
we went from a dearth of feud. We had a feud drought to all of a sudden you feel like they're all over the place again. You see feuds everywhere.
Yeah, they're everywhere. And so many feuds, in fact, that he is feuding with abstract concepts.
Okay.
So this is the most important feud I think going on right now. Yeah. It is not just because Elon has been eexing about it and so on, but because it affects all of us. It is Elon Musk and GDP. The concept of gross domestic product.
He's wrestling with gross domestic product.
He has said, I think more than once, that he thinks it's not a good statistic because it includes government spending. It would be better if it didn't include government spending. We've seen others in the Trump world, including Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, pick up on this idea. And of course, what's behind this is that the Atlanta Federal Reserve said that it thinks there's going to be a recession, that GDP is falling.
Or if not an outright recession, at least sees one really bad quarter. A pretty bad economic contraction coming up.
And of course, first of all, it's not surprising that people would be thinking about this, and as Elon Musk well knows, because he's enacting this personal austerity measure in the federal government and with many federal contractors. There is going to be at least some economic pain, at least by design.
Yes.
He's basically saying it's going to be like short-term pain for long-term gain, right? Yes, people are going to be fired and lose their jobs, but eventually interest rates will come down and we'll stop, this deficit spending.
Yeah, and listen, if they manage to pull that off, that would be something. I mean, economic adjustments, fiscal austerity is a tried and true formula and game plan implemented by leaders throughout the world, certainly in the developing world. I mean, when you mentioned that chainsaw earlier, Dana, that Musk was wielding the other day, that was a chainsaw handed to him right now by the greatest practitioner of this model, Javier Milei, an ally of Musk's in Argentina. And Milei has done this. He did radically gut government spending in a country that has a bad history of overspending. And there was a lot of real short-term pain. But there's a place where they are actually seeing the fruits of it now. Inflation is coming down rapidly. Argentines are happy with Milei. I don't know, though, Max, at this point, that Team Musk and Team Doge have actually cut enough to truly drive the economy. My sense is what's driving the economy and sentiment, and again, the fact that not just Tesla is crashing today, but the broader market is crashing, is just this sense that the whole Trump package, certainly with the tariffs and everything, is just spoiling consumer sentiment. And
yeah, I think that's right. Although they are laying off a substantial number of government employees, and I don't think it would be showing up just yet.
I don't know that it's enough at this point to have a critical mass there. But in any event, he's grappling with Mr. Gross and Mr. Product. Does Mr. Product have anything to say in return? No, he's got no comment. Okay.
Well, I will say Axios did a pretty good piece on this yesterday, basically pointing out that this has been a question. It's not like economists are unaware of the issues with GDP. People talk about this all the time. In fact, the GDP statistics are frequently shown in different ways. The problem is it's pretty hard to remove. If you remove government spending, you arguably remove a bunch of the economy. The government spends money, and then the people who are working at those jobs spend money elsewhere. Like it's hard to untangle.
As a former economics reporter, I have heard this debate many times. I will just say that at this point in the U.S., where government spending is indeed a real driving force in this economy, and because it's just grown in recent years, it is indeed incredibly difficult to disentangle the two.
I mean, the awkwardness is that Trump did not run on this program really.
Of austerity.
He brought up Elon and said Elon was going to make things more efficient, but he didn't quite say the thing that Elon has said, which is we're going to have, a couple years of unpleasantness for a great future, and it's hard to know how the politics are going to play out. My suspicion is that a lot of Trump voters, not to mention Democrats, are going to be upset.
Okay, what's your next feud?
Okay, next feud. This is kind of a similar thing. This is Elon against global alliances. So
like NATO?
NATO and the United Nations. So GDP, roughly, we've been using this measure for about 80 years. The UN, what was the UN founded? About 70-ish years, 75 years ago. He responded to a blue check tweet saying it's time to leave NATO, and the UN saying, I agree. So strike one for leaving the UN.
Okay.
No response from the UN as far as I know just yet.
The Secretary General didn't decide to chime in. Okay, so he's taking on GDP, NATO, the UN. He also seems to be. Now, this is a much more, or do you have any more? Because I actually have
there's a zillion more. But
Can I
wanted to give you the two most geopolitically significant
high concept
feuds.
one. Can I give you one that's just sort of more of an old school brawl?
Yes.
But the other side hasn't taken the bait yet, and it is Elon Musk versus Mike Myers. Now, did everybody see the Saturday Night Live skit? They saw the Mike Myers doing Elon. We have an audio clip, and
I didn't actually see it.
All right, Magnus, hit us with the clip.
I've watched it.
I really enjoy everything you're doing with Doge, Elon.
Well, they're saying I'm firing people with no cause. But I do have cause. It's cause I feel like it. Come on! Glitch!
Now, I myself thought it was pretty damn funny. Elon did not. I believe Elon's eeks was humor fails when it lies.
I guess I have to add my abstract feud list to Elon Musk versus humor now.
Well, failing humor.
Just to critique the Myers performance for a minute.
Oh, so you're with Musk.
No,
so it's Max Chafkin and Elon Musk versus Mike Myers.
I think the accent needs a little work.
Probably.
The mannerisms I thought were strong, and the way he sort of presented Musk's kind of manic, pinballing from like joking, not joking, that whole thing, like that felt very true. And then the kind of dynamic between Musk and Trump was quite funny.
No, it was brilliant, and they turned it around really quickly. Although no, Max disapproves of the accent. I will note, Max, one final point on Mike Myers. He, being Canadian and all, he had a T-shirt on, which I had not realized initially, that read, "Canada is not for sale." Okay, so State of the Union is just a few hours from now, for those listening immediately, once the pod hits, which should be about everybody.
Sorry.
State of the Union, Trump will address Congress. Musk, almost certainly. I mean, the first buddy's got to be there. What's he wearing? Max Chafkin.
Oh, man. I mean, he's clearly going to wear his kind of weird, Oval Office getup. You got the dark MAGA hat.
He's not going to go dressed up as Zelensky?
The sports coat, the tech support or other novelty T-shirt.
Typical dress down.
Dark trousers. The question is, how many Musk children
will
is
X
be in
there?
attendance?
That's what I was going. Oh, so you're sure X is definitely there. The question is which of X's siblings joins him?
If X is not there, I would be shocked.
You're turning it off. No X. I'm not watching. Okay, that's what you got. Dana.
I'm super curious to see who Musk sits with. Like, is he sitting with the cabinet? Is he sitting with his mom? Is he sitting with, like, Republican members of Congress? Like, I want the seating chart of, like, the chamber.
I mean, the thing we really should be looking at, especially for people who are interested in kind of Musk's future here within the Trump administration, is how Trump talks about it. How enthusiastic does Trump praise Elon? How big on Doge is he? Do you see any efforts to hedge or anything like that? Those are going to be questions for me. Although, based on the body language and everything we've seen recently, it seems like Trump will probably tout it as one of his achievements.
Maybe. My out of the box guess is that hedge is so great that he keeps Elon out of the room.
What? What did you say? Keeps him out of the what?
Bold take. Papadopoulos.
He keeps out of the room. That, Elon doesn't show up.
Out of the room?
Out of the room.
Overflow room. Wow.
Yeah,
No, wait.
Oh, my God.
David, Elon is addressing Republican members of Congress before the State of the Union. Elon
This is what this is. This is about as good as my Kentucky Derby.
Wait, is what's his name again? Your
Chancellor
horse?
McPatrick. By the way,
he's hurt, right? McPatrick is hurt.
But he runs this Saturday. He's back off the bench this Saturday. Tampa Bay Downs. It's 5:00.
I'll be watching.
Right. Okay. Max, Dana, thank you as always.
Great to be here.
Thank you.
This episode was produced by Stacey Wong. Anna Masarakis is our editor, and Rayhan Harmansi, our senior editor. Blake Maples handles engineering, and Dave Purcell fact checks. Our supervising producer is Magnus Henriksen. The Elon Inc. theme is written and performed by Taka Yasuzawa and Alex Sugiura. Brendan Francis Newnham is our executive producer, and Sage Bauman is the head of Bloomberg Podcasts. A big thanks, as always, to our supporters Joel Weber and Brad Stone. I'm David Papadopoulos. If you have a minute, rate and review our show. It'll help other listeners find us. See you next week.